Hi, I'm Mina.
And I'm Yules.
Thanks for tuning in to Artificially Informed.
Welcome back to the Deep Dive. It is Monday, February 2nd, 2026.
Here we are again.
And if you are tuning in right now, it's probably because you're looking for the signal in all that noise. You want to know what's actually happening in the world.
But without, having to doom scroll through 1,000 different tabs or get yelled at by cable news.
Exactly. I'm your host, and I'm the one who spent the weekend burying myself under just a mountain of articles and reports so you didn't have to.
And I'm here to help you climb out from under that mountain and actually make sense of the view from the top. And what a view we have today.
We really do. The stack is massive. So, to the learner, if you're new here, this is the promise. We take the week's most dense, most complex, and, let's be honest, frankly overwhelming news.
From scientific journals, geopolitical cables, tech reports.
All of it. And we try to extract the gold nuggets. We find the stories that actually matter and hopefully give you a few of those aha moments along the way.
Precisely. And today's mission, well, it's a big one. We are really looking at the future of humanity, but through a very, very wide lens.
It's true. We're going from the microscopic, literally inside the organelles of your own cells, all the way out to the absolute edge of the solar system.
It's a bit of whiplash this week.
It really is. We've got the chaotic frontier of artificial intelligence, which is getting weirder and much more litigious by the day.
Oh, the lawsuits are piling up.
And we've also got this shifting geopolitical chessboard here on Earth that is, well, let's just say it's freezing cold and heating up at the exact same time.
That is a very accurate description. We are going to be prioritizing science, space, and technology today.
Right.
And quite frankly, that's because that is where the fundamental paradigm shifts seem to be happening right now. But we absolutely cannot ignore the global news.
No way.
Okay.
Because the decisions being made in capital cities this week, from Washington to Moscow to Beijing, are going to determine who gets to control all that technology.
It's all connected.
Exactly. So here's my teaser for you. Did you know that scientists have found a literal time capsule inside your own body? A biological black box that records the history of your health.
It's incredible stuff.
Or, and this one just floored me, that wolves in Alaska have apparently decided they're tired of deer and have started hunting sea creatures.
It's evolution happening in real time. It's just wild. But let's not get ahead of ourselves.
Right. Let's unpack this. We are going to start with section 1, the new space age, because the news coming out of the space sector this week is just, it's relentless.
It really is. And the big headline grabber has to be Artemis. We're inching closer and closer to the Artemis 2 mission.
This is the big one. The return of humans to the moon. I was reading this interview with Tom Parkinson, who's a program manager for the SLS. That's the Space Launch System at NASA.
NASA being the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, of course.
Of course. And usually, let's be honest, interviews with rocket engineers can be a little dry.
A little bit technical, yeah.
But you can just feel the energy, the excitement coming off the page here. He was talking about the transition from the Apollo era to now.
And that transition is absolutely key to understanding what's happening. Parkinson mentioned he had goosebumps just thinking about it.
Goosebumps.
And for a veteran engineer, that says something. This isn't a PR guy. He's been working on rocket engines since 1999. He worked on the J2X engine.
So he's seeing it all.
He has seen the long, slow grind of canceled programs, the budget fights, the technical delays. For someone like that to say he has goosebumps, it tells you we are at the finish line of the development phase and right at the starting line of the operational phase.
He made a really interesting distinction, I thought, between Apollo and Artemis. He said Apollo was a race to a destination.
Or sprint.
Right. Whereas Artemis is about building a permanent infrastructure.
And that's the so what of this whole story. That's why this is different. Apollo was a sprint, like you said. You get there, you plant the flag, you take the photo, you grab some rocks, you leave.
It was a demonstration of capability. Look what we can do.
Exactly. A powerful one, but a demonstration. Artemis is a marathon. It's about building the gas stations, the habitats, the orbital dynamics around the moon, the gateway station that allow us to stay.
So it's the difference between a camping trip and actually building a house.
A perfect analogy. You're not just visiting anymore, you're moving in.
And it feels like there's a massive philosophical difference between how the U.S. is approaching this and what we're seeing from the East, particularly China. The sources were drawing a pretty sharp contrast there.
Oh, absolutely. That's the geopolitical angle of space, and it's impossible to ignore. The U.S. strategy, as highlighted in all these reports about Artemis 2, is leaned heavily into openness.
What does that mean in practice?
It means international collaboration. They're bringing in the Europeans through ESA, the Canadians, the Japanese with JXA. It's a diverse crew, a woman, a person of color. It is designed from the ground up to be a public, global event.
Okay, so it's like a big team project.
Right. And you contrast that with the reports we have on China's program. The word that keeps coming up is closed.
But closed doesn't mean slow, right? I mean, they're moving fast.
Not at all. That's the crucial point. Their program is rapid, it's technologically advanced, but it is opaque. It's a state-run, military-adjacent operation. We learn about their successes after they happen, not before.
Right.
And the analysis in these articles points out that the U.S. policy of leveraging commercial partnerships, bringing SpaceX, Blue Origin, all these other players into the fold openly, is a huge strategic advantage.
How so?
It creates an ecosystem, a competitive, innovative market.
Well.
China has immense state capacity, which is powerful. But the U.S. is betting on the, let's call it the chaotic, innovative energy of the free market to outpace them in the long run.
Speaking of chaotic energy,
If you're going with this.
Elon Musk. We can't do a space segment without talking about him. And the big news this week are these rumors, backed by some pretty heavy reporting, about a potential merger between SpaceX and XAI.
This is a fascinating prospect. It's more than just a corporate shuffle. If you connect the dots here, think about what those two entities really represent.
Okay, lay it out.
SpaceX gives you the transport, the rockets, the physical hardware to get things and people into orbit and beyond, and it gives you the global connectivity layer through Starlink.
The nervous system of the planet, basically.
In a way, yes. And then XAI gives you the brain, the Grok AI model, the intelligence layer.
So you merge them, and you basically have a real-life sci-fi mega corporation. You have the nervous system, the transportation network, and the brain, all under one roof.
Mm-hmm.
Is that good, or is that just terrifyingly efficient?
It's incredibly powerful, and potentially both. Think about the practical applications. Think about the sheer volume of data Starlink has to process every second.
It must be astronomical.
It is. It's managing thousands of satellites, autonomously dodging space debris, routing internet traffic for millions of users across the globe. Now, you merge that with a dedicated cutting-edge AI research lab.
So the AI could optimize the whole constellation in real time.
In ways humans probably couldn't even conceive of. It could allow rockets to make autonomous decisions during flight anomalies. It could manage the entire Mars colonization architecture he talks about.
It turns the hardware into software. It makes the whole system intelligent.
Exactly. And just look at the operational tempo SpaceX is already maintaining. It's a testament to their current level of automation. This week, they launched Starlink satellites from 2 different coasts, California and Florida.
And how long?
A span of 2 days.
2 days.
January 29th from Vandenberg in California and January 30th from Cape Canaveral in Florida. It's becoming routine for them.
And that's what's so wild. The fact that it's routine is what makes it so impressive.
It's normalizing the extraordinary. That cadence, that launch rate is something most nation states, most countries cannot match in an entire year.
It's a different league. And it's not just the big giants like SpaceX. I saw a note about Rocket Lab finally getting that South Korean disaster monitoring satellite up into orbit.
Yes, the 425 project satellite. It was delayed a few times, but they got it up. And that's critical infrastructure for South Korea.
How so?
It's for early warning systems against natural disasters, typhoons, floods. It's also, keeping an eye on their northern neighbor. So again, notice the trend. A sovereign nation, South Korea, relying on a private, publicly traded American company, Rocket Lab, to deploy its own critical national security infrastructure.
The lines are just completely blurring between public and private in space.
They've all but disappeared.
But here's the story that I think flies under the radar but might be the most futuristic thing we've talked about yet. Varda Space Industries.
Oh, yes. The in-orbit manufacturing.
Right. They just successfully used NASA's heat shield material to bring a capsule back to Earth. But they're not bringing back moon rocks or data. They're bringing back pharmaceuticals.
This is the frontier. This is what people have been talking about for decades, and it's finally happening. Manufacturing in orbit.
So the material they used is called CPA.
CPA. Conformal phenolic impregnated carbon ablator. It's a mouthful.
It is.
But basically, it's an advanced heat shield that NASA developed and then licensed to them. But you're right, the real story isn't the shield, it's what the shield is protecting. It's why they are doing this.
Yeah, explain that to me again. Why do I need drugs made in space? Are they stronger? Do they work better? What's the deal?
It comes down to some pretty basic physics, actually. It's all about crystallization.
Okay.
On Earth, when you try to grow very pure crystals, which is what many modern drugs are at a molecular level, gravity gets in the way.
How does gravity get in the way?
It causes convection currents in the fluid the crystals are growing in. The heavier molecules sink, the lighter ones float. It creates tiny imperfections in the crystal lattice. The structure isn't perfect.
So gravity basically makes the soup messy while it's cooking.
Exactly. A perfect analogy. But in microgravity, in orbit, those convection forces are gone. You can grow incredibly pure, perfect crystals. Or, even more excitingly, you can sometimes grow different forms of crystals, different polymorphs that simply cannot exist under Earth's gravity.
Which could lead to entirely new drugs.
Or much more effective versions of existing ones. Varda is proving the whole business model. You can manufacture these high-value pharmaceuticals in orbit, and then you can bring them back safely. This isn't exploration anymore. This is the industrialization of low Earth orbit.
So we're really moving from just visiting space to actually working in space. That's a huge shift.
It's the whole point of reducing launch costs,
Yeah.
to make space a place of industry.
Okay, so let's go further out. Let's go to deep space. NASA's Juno spacecraft has been hanging out around Jupiter for a while.
It has.
And it just saw something absolutely massive on Io, Jupiter's moon.
The largest volcanic eruption ever seen on Io. And you have to remember, Io is already the most volcanically active body in the entire solar system.
Just a ball of volcanoes, right?
It's a literal hellscape of sulfur and lava constantly being squeezed and stretched by Jupiter's immense gravity. Juno captured these images of an eruption plume that are just. They're redefining our understanding of how active these moons can be. It's not a little puff of smoke. It's a planetary-scale geological event.
And then, on the complete flip side of the fire and brimstone of Io, we have Europa, the icy moon.
The one everyone hopes has a liquid water ocean.
Right. And scientists went back to data from 1997 from the old Galileo spacecraft, and they found something new.
This is the beauty of data archival. This is why we keep everything. You look at 25-year-old data with new eyes, new computers, new algorithms, and you can pull out secrets that were hidden in plain sight.
So what did they find?
They found evidence of ammonia-bearing compounds on the surface, specifically in a region where the ice seems to be geologically young and disrupted.
Okay, why do we care about ammonia? I mean, other than that, it smells bad.
Well, it does, but chemically, ammonia is a nitrogen source. And life as we know it, every form of life on Earth, requires nitrogen. But the really exciting part is the location. Finding it on the surface strongly suggests a connection to the subsurface ocean.
So it's like the ocean is burping stuff up onto the ice.
Essentially, yes. The ice shell on Europa is miles thick, 10, 20 miles, maybe more. The idea of drilling through that is a monumental engineering challenge.
Right.
But if the ocean is spewing material up to the surface through cracks or cryovolcanoes, it means we can sample the ocean without ever drilling. We just have to land, scoop up some of the fresh-looking snow, and analyze it.
That makes the search for life a whole lot easier.
Infinitely easier. It turns a nightmare mission into something that's actually feasible with current technology.
Speaking of searching for life, we have a new planet candidate, HD 137010.
It just rolls right off the tongue, doesn't it?
Catchy name. But the details are what matter. It's an Earth-sized planet about 146 light years away.
Which is relatively close. In cosmic terms, it's in our neighborhood.
And the headline I saw said, potentially habitable. But then, you read the fine print, it's minus 68 degrees Celsius. That sounds a little chilly.
It is cold. It's Mars-like or colder.
Nah.
But the big caveat is the atmosphere. We don't know if it has one yet. If it has a dense carbon dioxide atmosphere, it could trap enough heat through the greenhouse effect to have liquid water on its surface.
Because it's not a tropical paradise, but it's not an impossible freezer either.
Exactly. It's on the absolute outer edge of what we call the habitable zone. The reason it's exciting is not because we're going to pack our bags and move there, but because it refines our statistics. It helps us answer the question, how common are rocky, Earth-sized planets?
Right.
And the answer seems to be very.
And finally, for our deep space tour, the James Webb Space Telescope. It's always got something incredible. This week, it zoomed in on the Helix Nebula.
The Eye of God Nebula. It's one of those famous objects in the sky for amateur astronomers.
It is. And the images show these things called comet-like pillars. But the source said this is a preview of our own sun's fate. That's a little ominous.
It is a bit sobering, isn't it? The Helix Nebula is what's called a planetary nebula, which is a confusing name. It has nothing to do with planets.
Right.
It's what's left over when a star like our sun dies. After it burns through its fuel, it sheds its outer layers of gas into space, leaving a tiny, hot, white dwarf star in the center. Webb is showing us the intricate mechanics of that death. The pillars are formed by the interplay of the hot radiation from the white dwarf and the cooler gas being pushed away.
So it's beautiful, but it's basically a cosmic gravestone.
It is a memento mori for our entire solar system a few billion years from now.
A beautiful cosmic gravestone. On that cheerful note, let's pivot to something that might either kill us much sooner or save us all. Section 2, the AI frontier.
It was a very busy and, as you said, a very legally complicated week in the world of AI.
Let's start with the fun stuff before we get into lawsuits and the scandals. Google launched something called Project Genie.
Right, and this represents a really significant shift, I think. We've had generative text, we have generative images, generative audio. This is generative worlds.
The article I read used the phrase marshmallow castles. So I can literally type a castle made of marshmallows with a chocolate moat, and it will build a playable 3D environment.
That's the idea. Right now, most of our interaction with generative AI is passive. You read the text it writes, you look at the image it draws. Project Genie is about active creation. You aren't just looking at the marshmallow castle, you can theoretically walk through it, interact with it.
It's the democratization of game design.
And virtual environment creation, architectural mock-ups, training simulations, the possibilities are huge.
My kids are going to absolutely lose their minds over this. But then we have Apple. They're always so quiet, they never announce anything until it's perfectly polished and done, and then boom, they spend nearly $2 billion.
And you have to pay attention when they do. They bought an Israeli startup called QAI.
Right, and this is significant. The reporting says QAI focuses on silent speech and audio-visual AI.
Silent speech? That sounds like something out of a spy movie. Is it reading my lips?
Essentially, yes, but in a much more advanced way. It's not just about cameras. It's about analyzing facial muscle movements, either with advanced vision AI or potentially other sensors like electromyography to interpret speech without any sound being made. Okay, so connect that to an iPhone or the Vision Pro headset.
Imagine you're in a crowded, noisy room or you're in a quiet meeting and you can't talk out loud. You could send a detailed text message or a command to your device just by mouthing the words.
So no more shouting, "Hey Siri," in a coffee shop and having everyone look at you.
Exactly. It's a huge leap for privacy. It's an incredible accessibility tool for people with speech impairments, and it represents a whole new user interface paradigm.
That is incredibly cool and also just slightly terrifying.
That's the theme of AI, isn't it?
It really is. And speaking of big money, there's a report that Amazon is in talks to invest $50 billion in OpenAI.
50 with a B.
$50 billion, that's not an investment. That's buying a seat at the head of the table.
It's the battle of the cloud giants. You have to see it through that lens. Microsoft has been the main financial and infrastructure backer of OpenAI. Their models run on Microsoft's Azure cloud.
Right.
If Amazon, which runs the biggest cloud provider in the world, AWS, Amazon Web Services, steps in with that kind of capital, it completely scrambles the landscape.
It's not about chatbots. It's about cloud dominance.
It's about using AI as the battering ram to secure their cloud infrastructure futures. They all know that whoever hosts in the intelligence, whoever runs the models that everyone else builds on top of, wins the next decade of tech.
And while these American giants are fighting over the infrastructure, there was a fascinating report about India looking at the application layer. India is apparently teaching Google how to scale AI in education.
India is a massive and perfect testbed for this kind of technology. They're projecting the AI education market there to hit over $1 billion by 2030. But it's not just about the money, it's the method. The article highlights how they're trying to move away from rote learning, just memorizing facts, and using AI tutors to foster critical thinking and problem-solving skills.
At a scale that would be impossible with human teachers.
Exactly. In a country with a population of over 1.4 billion people, you can't hire enough human tutors to give every child personalized attention. AI is the only way to scale personalized education. It could be a huge leap forward for them.
It's amazing. But now we have to talk about the Wild West side of this, the ethics. The legal battles. Elon Musk's Grok AI is in some very hot water in Europe.
This is a major test case. The European Union is officially investigating Grok.
Why?
because it was found to be generating undressing deepfakes, so creating fake nude images of real women, including, unbelievably, the Deputy Prime Minister of Sweden, Ebba Busch.
That is just horrific, and it's exactly what people warned would happen with this technology.
It is, and this is where the EU's Digital Services Act, the DSA, comes into play. This is exactly the scenario they legislated for.
So what can they do?
The DSA allows for massive fines, up to 6% of a company's global annual revenue. This isn't a slap on the wrist. For a company the size of X, that could be billions of dollars. This is the regulators in Brussels flexing their muscles against a U.S. tech giant that, in their view, failed to put basic guardrails in place.
It's a clash of ideologies, really.
Yep.
U.S. free speech absolutism versus EU privacy and dignity protections.
That's the core of it. And it's not just about images. The music industry is now coming for the AI companies over text.
Right, the Anthropic lawsuit.
A $3 billion lawsuit. Universal Music Group, Sony, a bunch of others are suing Anthropic, which makes the Claude AI, for flagrant piracy of copyrighted lyrics.
So the argument is that the AI was trained on all their song lyrics without a license.
Precisely. If you ask the AI to, say, write a song in the style of Taylor Swift and it spits out entire verses of her actual copyrighted lyrics, that's pretty strong evidence that it ingested that property without paying for it.
And this case could set a huge precedent.
Monumental. It could decide whether training data is covered under fair use or if it's industrial scale theft. If the courts rule it's theft, the cost of training these large language models goes up astronomically. You'd have to license everything.
And then there's a pure safety aspect. This was a disturbing one. Amazon found CSAM, that's child sexual abuse material, in its own AI training data.
That is the dark, horrifying side of the scrape the entire internet approach to building these models. Big data includes the absolute worst of humanity.
So what do they do?
Well, they said they found it and removed it, which is the right thing to do, but it highlights how incredibly hard it is to scrub a data set that is petabytes in size. The fact that it was there in the first place creates this massive liability.
If you train a model on poison, it learns poison.
And you can never be 100% sure you got all of it out. It's a fundamental problem they're all grappling with.
And maybe as a result of all these issues, the glitches, the copyright fears, even the hype machine is sputtering a little bit. I saw that OpenAI's video generator Sora saw its downloads drop by 45%.
It's a great reminder that a cool demo on Twitter doesn't always equal a sticky, useful product. The hype cycle is real, but user retention is hard.
So people just got bored with it.
I think so. People played with it, they realized it was hard to get exactly what they wanted, the generation times were long, and maybe the novelty just wore off. It's not quite ready for primetime professional use yet.
Before we leave AI, I have to ask you about this new lab with the great name, Flapping Airplanes.
I love that name.
It's fantastic. They just got $180 million in funding from huge names like Sequoia and GV, Google's venture arm. What is their big idea?
Their pitch is all about data efficiency.
What does that mean?
Right now, to make an AI smart, we use a brute force method. We feed it basically the entire public internet. Flapping Airplanes is one of several new labs trying to solve the problem differently. They want to make AI learn more like a human.
From smaller amounts of data.
Exactly, using logic, reasoning, and understanding of the world rather than just statistical pattern matching on a massive scale. If they or anyone can crack that problem, it changes the economics of AI completely.
You wouldn't need a $50 billion investment from Amazon to train a smart model.
You could do it on a much smaller, cheaper scale. It would democratize the creation of powerful AI. It's a huge, huge goal.
That is a perfect lead-in to our next section. We've talked about the digital brains we're building. Now let's look at our own biological ones, or rather, our cells. Section 3, the secret history of us.
This is where science meets history and archaeology in a really unexpected and fascinating way.
You teased it in the intro, the internal time capsule. This is the biology story that just jumped out at me.
Cellular vaults.
It sounds like a bank or something.
In a way, it acts like one. It's a data vault. These are tiny, barrel-shaped organelles that exist inside most of our cells. And for decades, biologists have been puzzled by them. We knew they were there, but we didn't really know what they did.
Just mysterious little barrels floating around.
Exactly. But this new research, published in the journal Nature, shows that they can be engineered to act as recorders. They can be programmed to capture and store a history of the cell's activity. Specifically, its mRNA history.
mRNA, that's the messenger molecule that tells the cell what proteins to make.
Right. So this vault can record which genes were being turned on or off over time. You said it in the intro, and the analogy is perfect. It's a flight data recorder, a black box, for your body.
Yeah, this just the implications are staggering. Think about it for cancer research.
It's a revolution. Imagine a cancer patient. Right now, by the time we detect a tumor, the damage is done. The cell has already gone rogue, it's divided a million times. We don't know the exact sequence of events that led it down that path.
We just see the car crash at the end.
Exactly. With a technology like this, what they're calling a time vault, you could theoretically extract the halts from those cancer cells, sequence their contents, and see the whole story. On this date, this gene mutated.
Yeah.
Then 2 weeks later, this environmental toxin caused this protein to fold wrong. Then this other gene turned off.
It changes cancer research from a detective story, where you arrive at the murder scene after the fact,
To a documentary where you get to watch the crime happen in slow motion. The potential for developing target therapies is just immense.
That is profound. Okay, so from the internal record in our cells to an external record of human history, we found a star map.
The lost star map of Hipparchus.
And this was like a legend, right? We knew from other ancient writers that he wrote one, but we didn't actually have it.
Correct. Hipparchus was a Greek astronomer from the 2nd century BC. He's often called the father of trigonometry, an absolute genius. We knew he cataloged the stars with unprecedented accuracy, but the document itself was thought to be lost to time. Burned in a fire, rotted away, who knows?
Until now. And they found it in a palimpsest. That's a great Scrabble word. Break that down for us.
It is a great word. Back in the day, parchment, which was made from sheepskin, was incredibly valuable and labor-intensive to produce. You didn't just throw it away when you were done with
I
it.
recycled it.
You recycled it. So monks in the Middle Ages would often take an old book with, say, Greek astronomical text on it, and they would literally scrape the old ink off the page and then write a new Christian prayer book or something on top of it.
So the old text is still there, just invisible.
Invisible to the naked eye. But using multispectral imaging at the SLAC National Accelerator Laboratory, scientists were able to bombard the parchment with different wavelengths of light. They can read the faint chemical residue, the iron signature of the erased ink that's still embedded in the material.
They're reading the invisible past.
And underneath a medieval text, they found it. Star coordinates. And when they analyzed them, they matched the precision that was attributed to Hipparchus. It's proof that this knowledge wasn't lost, just hidden. We're using 21st century particle accelerators to recover 2nd century BC scientific data.
That is just so cool. And speaking of rewriting history, let's go to Germany. Brandenburg, to be specific. A metal detectorist found a wheel cross.
A small bronze pendant dated to about 1,000 years ago.
Now, why is finding a Christian cross in Germany a big deal? I mean, Germany is a Christian country.
It is now. But it's about where and when this was found. This region of Brandenburg, 1,000 years ago, was thought to be predominantly pagan, Slavic tribes. The official historical narrative is that Christianity was imposed on them later, often through conquest.
Okay.
Finding a personal item like this, a Christian symbol that someone would wear, suggests that Christianity had a foothold there much earlier than the textbooks say. It wasn't a clean, top-down conversion.
It suggests a more complicated story.
A much messier overlap of faiths and cultures. It complicates the simple narrative, which is what good archaeology always does.
And one more for the history buffs. But this is deep, deep history. NASA is resurrecting ancient enzymes.
This is wild. They're resurrecting nitrogenase.
What does that do?
Nitrogenase is a crucial enzyme that life uses to perform nitrogen fixation. That means taking inert nitrogen gas from the atmosphere and turning it into ammonia, a form that plants and other organisms can use as food. It's fundamental to most life on Earth.
Okay, so NASA brought it back from the dead.
They used synthetic biology and computational modeling to reconstruct the likely genetic sequence of this enzyme from 3.2 billion years ago, and then they synthesized it in the lab.
So it's like Jurassic Park, but for individual molecules.
In a way, yes. But the goal isn't a theme park, it's astrobiology. It's to understand what the chemical signatures of very early life on Earth looked like.
So we know what to look for on Mars.
Exactly. If we know what the biosignatures of ancient, primitive Earth life were, we can tune the instruments on our rovers and future missions to look for those exact same chemical fingerprints on other planets.
That transitions us perfectly to our next section. Section 4, Nature's Adaptation and Extremes. Because if life on Earth is anything, it is adaptable. And sometimes it's terrifyingly and surprisingly adaptable.
And we have to start with the wolves.
The wolves in Alaska. Gray wolves. When I think of wolves, I think of them chasing elk or deer or caribou through a snowy forest. But this report says they are hunting sea otters.
On Prince of Wales Island in southeast Alaska, Researchers have been tracking them and analyzing their diets, and they found that for some packs, marine life, especially sea otters, now makes up a huge portion of what they eat.
Are they swimming? How are they even catching them?
They are. They're island hopping, hunting along the coastline. It's a fundamental shift in behavior.
But why? Why the change?
It's likely a combination of factors: ecosystem pressure, the deer populations, their traditional prey, might be fluctuating. At the same time, sea otter populations in that area have recovered from near extinction and are now an abundant, high-fat food source.
So they adapted.
It's a perfect example of what scientists call behavioral plasticity. Nature doesn't stick to the script we write for it. If the menu changes, a smart predator changes its hunting strategy.
And it's not just the wolves. There was a similar story about polar bears in Svalbard, the Norwegian archipelago.
Sure.
We usually hear about them starving because the sea ice is melting.
And for most of the polar bear population, that is still a huge and existential risk. We have to be very clear about that.
Right.
But this one report was interesting. It focused on a specific subpopulation in Svalbard and found that some of those bears are actually getting fatter and healthier.
How is that possible with no ice?
They've switched their diet. They are ambushing and eating reindeer. They're raiding bird colonies for eggs. They are essentially moving from being a marine mammal specialist to a land-based generalist predator.
So they're becoming more like grizzly bears.
Behaviorally, yes. Now, again, the scientists caution this might not be sustainable long-term for the whole species, but it shows a level of resilience and adaptability that, frankly, surprised a lot of people.
Life finds a way. But while some animals are adapting, the planet itself is throwing some serious curveballs. We had a bomb cyclone in the U.S. this week.
A historic winter storm that underwent bombogenesis, which is a rapid drop in atmospheric pressure. It slammed into the Carolinas and Virginia.
And these are places that aren't really equipped for big snow.
Not at all. We're talking up to 9 inches of heavy, wet snow, widespread power outages, traffic chaos. It's an extreme weather event in a region that doesn't usually see it.
And at the exact same time, on the other side of the world, southern Africa is facing catastrophic flooding.
Just devastating. Over 200 people reported killed across several countries, and the scientific analysis in the reports explicitly links this to climate change supercharging the rainfall.
How does that work?
It's basic physics. Warmer air holds more moisture, so when a storm system does form, it has more water vapor to work with. When it rains, it just dumps these incredible, unprecedented amounts of water.
And then, as if floods and snow weren't enough, fire in Argentina.
A state of emergency was declared in provinces like Chubut and New Cane in Patagonia, massive drought-fueled wildfires destroying huge swaths of forest and ranch land. It's a global snapshot of a climate system that is becoming more volatile and extreme.
But in the middle of all this bad news, there was one piece of climate data from NASA that was just really weird. It said that global sea level rise actually slowed down in 2025 because of La Niña.
This is a fascinating anomaly, and it shows how complex the Earth system is.
Walk me through this, because it sounds counterintuitive. How can a weather pattern make the oceans stop rising?
Okay, think of the global water system like a bathtub. The ocean is the water in the tub. The continents, the land, are the floor around the tub.
Okay.
Normally, water is flowing into the tub from melting glaciers and ice sheets. That's sea level rise. But in 2025, the La Niña pattern caused so much intense rainfall over the land, specifically over the Amazon basin in Australia, that a massive volume of water was temporarily moved from the tub onto the floor.
So the water was just stuck on land for a while, in lakes and soil.
Exactly. So much rain fell on the continents that it didn't run back into the ocean immediately. And the volume was so huge that it was actually measurable as a temporary dip or slowing in the rate of global sea level rise.
But NASA was very clear, this is a temporary blip.
Very clear. This is not a fix. The water will eventually find its way back to the ocean, and the long-term trend of accelerating sea level rise due to melting ice is still locked in. It's a temporary reprieve, not a solution.
It's just a strange little pause. Okay, speaking of solutions, or at least ingenuity, we have a materials science breakthrough. Unsinkable aluminum.
This is really cool. Researchers have created a new type of aluminum structure. They use lasers to etch a nanoscale pattern onto the surface of the metal.
And what does that do?
It makes the surface super hydrophobic. It traps a layer of air bubbles along the surface when it's in water. This trapped air provides so much buoyancy that the metal floats.
Okay, but what if you punch a hole in it? The Titanic was supposed to be unsinkable.
That's the amazing part. Even if you puncture it, the structure is designed in a way that the compartments trap air. It still floats. The water can't displace all the trapped air because of the surface tension created by the etching.
So what was the application? Safer ships.
Safer ships, unsinkable buoys for ocean monitoring, maybe even electronics that are completely waterproofed. It's a structural innovation that basically defies the natural density of the metal itself.
I love that. Human ingenuity fighting back a little bit. Okay, we have covered the universe, the cell, the AI brain, and the planet itself. Now let's talk about the people who are trying to run it all. Section 5, the global chessboard.
And the geopolitics this week are intense is probably an understatement.
We have to start with the U.S., Russia, and the war in Ukraine. There's this headline that's been everywhere about an energy ceasefire.
Right. So the story is this. President Donald Trump claims that he personally asked Russian President Vladimir Putin to temporarily stop missile strikes on Ukraine's energy grid.
And the reason given?
A severe cold snap hitting the region. President Trump framed it as a humanitarian request to prevent people from freezing.
Okay, that's the claim. Did the Kremlin confirm it?
This is the surprising part. Yes. Dmitry Peskov, the Kremlin spokesman, actually confirmed a partial pause on strikes against energy infrastructure effective until February 1st.
So Trump asks, Putin agrees. Is it really that simple?
That is the narrative being presented, but of course, it's never that simple. Analysts are looking at this from multiple angles.
What are they saying?
Well, you have the humanitarian angle that Trump is pushing, but at the same time, you have Ukrainian President Zelensky complaining publicly about severe shortages of air defense missiles. So a pause, for any reason, benefits Ukraine by giving them time to protect their grid and maybe resupply.
So is Russia doing it for humanitarian reasons, or is it a strategic pause? Maybe they're running low on missiles themselves, or they're repositioning.
Exactly. It's impossible to know the true motivation. It's a complex move on the chessboard that serves multiple purposes for all sides involved. It's never just one thing in geopolitics.
And while all that is happening, President Trump made a big domestic move. He named Kevin Warsh to replace Jerome Powell as the chairman of the Federal Reserve.
That is a major signal to the financial markets. Warsh is seen as being much more aligned with President Trump's economic vision than Powell was.
What does that mean in practice?
It could signal a shift in monetary policy coming down the pipe, potentially a move toward faster deregulation, or a different strategy on interest rates. The markets will be watching his first statements very, very closely.
Okay, let's move to the Middle East. It feels like the temperature there is just dialed all the way up to 11.
It really is. The big news is that the U.S. has deployed what's being described as a massive naval armada led by the aircraft carrier USS Abraham Lincoln to the Persian Gulf.
That is a classic show of force.
It's power projection designed to deter Iran and its proxies and reassure allies in the region. It's sending a very clear nonverbal message.
And at the same time, the European Union just crossed what Iran has called a red line.
They did. The EU has formally designated Iran's IRGC, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, as a terrorist organization.
And Iran's reaction?
They called it a strategic mistake and a huge provocation. This move makes any future negotiations on a nuclear deal or anything else much, much harder. It isolates Iran further, both economically and diplomatically.
And amid all this high-level strategy, there was that heartbreaking interview with Sacha Trufanov, the Israeli hostage who was held in Gaza for nearly 500 days and was recently released.
I saw that.
The headline quote was just, "I can breathe again." It really puts a human face on these abstract geopolitical conflicts.
It absolutely does. It reminds you that behind the armadas and the sanctions and the designations are individual human beings and families caught in the crossfire.
Now, let's look at our own hemisphere, Latin America. And there was a story out of Venezuela that was a genuine shocker for me.
A massive political and economic pivot. Venezuela's Vice President, Delcy Rodriguez, signed a new law that effectively opens up the country's state-run oil sector to privatization.
This is reversing decades of socialist policy under Chavez and Maduro.
Completely reversing it. But they're desperate. Their oil production has collapsed due to mismanagement and sanctions. They desperately need foreign investment and expertise.
And look at the timing. At the same time this is happening, the U.S. is lifting airspace restrictions on Venezuela.
And President Trump is having talks with Mexican President Sheinbaum about the USMCA trade deal. It feels like a major realignment of the Americas is happening, a move toward more economic integration.
Except, it seems, for Cuba.
Right. Cuba remains the outlier. President Trump declared a national emergency over what he called the Cuba threat, specifically regarding oil shipments. And almost immediately, China publicly pledged its support for Havana.
So the Cold War dynamic is still very much alive and well in the Caribbean.
It never really went away.
Speaking of China, let's move across the world to the Asia-Pacific.
Yeah.
There are signs of turbulence in Beijing. President Xi Jinping seems to be cleaning house.
A military purge, it looks like. A very high-ranking official, General Zhang Yuxia, was abruptly fired. And this comes amid swirling rumors of leaked Chinese nuclear secrets to the United States.
That sounds like something straight out of a Tom Clancy novel.
It really does. But it could signal a few things. Either there's genuine internal instability and mistrust at the highest levels of the People's Liberation Army, or it's simply Xi tightening his absolute control over the military's most sensitive branch, the rocket force.
And as this is happening, a U.S. panel is reportedly examining India's strategic role in countering China.
The alliances in the region are tightening. The U.S. is clearly viewing India as a key democratic counterweight to China's power in the Indo-Pacific.
And just to cleanse the palate a little bit before we wrap up this section, Taiwan's Person of the Year is a chatbot.
It is an AI chatbot named Quantao, which is designed to be an AI monk.
An AI monk? What on earth does an AI monk do?
It offers spiritual comfort and guidance. It can recite Buddhist sutras. It answers people's questions about life, suffering, and the path to enlightenment. It's become incredibly popular, and it just shows how deeply and differently AI is penetrating culture in Asia. It's not just seen as a productivity tool, it's also becoming a source of emotional and spiritual support.
That is wild. And finally, let's touch on business and economics. Tesla is making a huge pivot.
Elon Musk announced that Tesla is ending production of the Model S and the Model X.
Those are the cars that started it all for them, the original luxury EVs.
Gone. He is betting the entire farm on the Cybertruck and the future autonomous robo-taxi fleet. It's an incredibly bold, all-or-nothing kind of move.
And the wider markets are reacting to all this volatility in the tech world. Microsoft's stock tanked this week.
It dropped 11% in one day after a disappointing earnings report, and because it's such a huge company, it dragged the entire S&P 500 down with it.
And gold and silver prices are tumbling, too.
There's a lot of uncertainty out there. Investors seem to be moving away from safe havens and tech, but it's not clear where that money is going yet. It's a very volatile moment.
And hovering over all of this is the ongoing trade war. Or maybe we should call it the trade realignment.
I think that's a better term. The WTO, the World Trade Organization, put out a stark warning this week. They see evidence of a fundamental structural shift. The U.S. tariffs and the geopolitical tensions are reshaping global trade routes.
So it's not just a temporary dispute.
They're warning that we are moving away from the era of globalization and toward something else. Something more fragmented, more regional, more contentious.
So after all of that, what does this all mean? We've gone from the black box inside our own cells to the volcanic fury of Jupiter's moon, Io.
We've seen wolves learning to hunt in the ocean and AI learning to build marshmallow castles while the real world is dealing with floods and fires and freezes.
It is a study in contrasts, isn't it?
Yeah.
We are expanding our reach out into the cosmos with Artemis and finding new planets, while at the same time we're fighting more fiercely over lines on a map right here on Earth.
It's a real duality, unbelievable technological optimism set against a backdrop of geopolitical anxiety.
Here's my final provocative thought for you, our listener, to chew on this week. We are currently training these massive AIs on the sum of all human knowledge. Sometimes, as we've seen, recklessly, without regard for copyright or safety. We're building these powerful digital brains.
Right.
But at the very same time, we are using other amazing technologies to recover erased human history, like the Hipparchus star map. We are finding things we thought were lost forever.
It raises a really profound question. Are we building a future that actually remembers and learns from its past? Or are we just generating new disposable marshmallow castles to distract ourselves while the real world burns and floods around us?
Are we wise enough to handle the secrets of the black box inside our own cells and the secrets of the black box of AI at the exact same time? That really feels like the central question for 2026.
Indeed it is.
Thank you for diving deep with us. Stay curious.
And keep questioning everything.
We are your guides through the noise. We'll see you next time.
For enjoying Artificially Informed.
Hit subscribe and share it with a friend.
From the left, the right, and straight from the algorithm.
Thank you.
Welcome to the debate. It has been a week of, well, tectonic shifts, really. A week where the map of the world didn't just change, it felt like it was being redrawn in real time. We're looking at a landscape that stretches from the trading floors of Wall Street, where the AI bubble seems to be violently bursting, to the oil fields of Venezuela, where decades of ideology are just dissolving into privatization. We're watching Beijing, the Persian Gulf. I mean, it is global, it is volatile, and it's happening all at once.
It certainly hasn't been a quiet week, no. We are seeing a massive recalibration of power, of money, of influence. But I think we need to be careful not to mistake movement for chaos.
And that is exactly the disagreement we need to unpack today. As the United States turns sharply inward, implementing new tariffs, aggressive America First policies, and effectively walling itself off, is the rest of the world, from the global south to traditional European allies, being forced to build a new parallel economic and diplomatic architecture? Are we witnessing the final end of the unipolar moment?
Or to frame it the way I see it, are we simply witnessing a return to ruthless pragmatism? I'd argue that what you call fragmentation is actually just a market correction on a geopolitical scale. Nations are prioritizing survival and energy security over old hollow alliances. It is becoming a transactional world, and frankly, that might be a more stable system than the one we're leaving behind.
I see why you might hope for stability in a transactional world. But let me lay out why I believe we're seeing a dangerous fracturing of the global order. We have to start with the warning lights, really, flashing on the dashboard of the global economy. Specifically, the news out of Germany this week. BaFin, the German financial regulator, issued a stark warning regarding the stability of the US dollar as a global reserve currency.
Well, regulators issue warnings all the time. I mean, it's their job to be paranoid.
But context matters. This isn't a blog post. This is a regulator in the heart of the G7, a pillar of the European economy, essentially telling its banks that the bedrock of American power, the dollar, is becoming a risk asset. Think about the psychology of that. If BaFin advises hedging against the dollar, it triggers a capital flight that, becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. It signals that even America's closest allies are losing faith in Washington's ability to manage its own currency responsibly.
I think you're reading a bit too much doom into a technical advisory. But go on.
It connects directly to the data coming out of the East. Maxim Oreshkin, the Russian presidential aide, he didn't mince words this week. He explicitly stated that by the end of 2025, 85% of Russian transactions will bypass Western currencies entirely. Now, you might dismiss that as Russian propaganda, but he pointed out something crucial. The G7 economies are weakening due to the blowback from their own sanctions.
Sanctions always have leakage. That's nothing new.
It's not just leakage, though. It's structural isolation. The South China Morning Post published a devastating analysis this week on the hidden fault lines revealed by Trump's tariffs. These policies are locking the global South into unfavorable trade roles with the West. It is effectively forcing them to seek alternatives like the RCEP, the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership.
Right. And for our listeners who might not track every acronym, RCEP is the world's largest free trade bloc anchored by China.
Exactly. And the United States isn't even in it. So by putting up tariff walls, the U.S. is pushing nations into a club where Washington has no vote and no leverage. I mean, even Mark Carney, hardly a radical anti-capitalist, is warning about U.S. encroachment on Canadian sovereignty, specifically referencing the threat to ban Canadian planes. When you threaten your neighbor's airspace and your currency scares your allies, you aren't leading the world. You are isolating yourself from it.
I hear the alarm bells you're ringing, and I'm not saying there isn't noise. But let's strip away the headlines and look at the behavior. You see fragmentation? I see the market forcing rationality. You mentioned the global South running away, but consider the situation in Venezuela. This is arguably the biggest story of the week, yet it's being buried. Interim President Delcy Rodriguez just signed a law to privatize the oil sector,
which is a desperate attempt to stay afloat.
It's a reversal of 2 decades of socialist dogma. This is the planet home reality check. You can have all the ideology you want, but eventually you need to eat, and you need revenue. Venezuela privatizing its oil proves that even anti-Western governments bow to market realities when they're pushed. And notice the U.S. response. Trump announced he's opening Venezuelan airspace and that Americans can visit soon.
So we trade principles for oil barrels?
We trade conflict for commerce. That's a transactional thaw. Ideology took a back seat to the reality of energy and economics. And it's not just there. Total Energies is relaunching the Mozambique gas project despite the history of violence in that region. They're calling it too big to fail. Why? Because capital flows where resources exist. The world isn't breaking apart, it's just cutting new deals that make economic sense. It's messy, yes, but it's rational.
But at what cost? And how sustainable are those deals when the underlying foundation of the modern economy is, well, crumbling? Let's talk about that foundation. We saw the S&P 500 close lower this week, but the real story was Microsoft. One of the titans of the modern economy plunged 11%. That wiped out $400 billion in value in a heartbeat.
It was a correction. The valuation was stretched.
It's more than a correction. The market is fundamentally questioning the AI investment thesis. The entire Western economic narrative right now is built on technological superiority. If that AI bubble pops, if the productivity miracle doesn't happen, what leverage is left? You have a hollowed-out manufacturing base and a tech sector that just vaporized $500 billion.
I'm sorry, but I just don't buy that a stock market correction equals the end of Western civilization. The tech war is much more nuanced than a bad day on Wall Street for Microsoft. You say the West is losing its grip, but consider the hardware reality. China just conditionally approved DeepSeek to buy NVIDIA's H200 chips.
Conditionally being the operative word.
But they approve it, even in the middle of a trade war, even with all this parallel architecture you speak of. China still needs American silicon. The hardware dependency remains. That is a tether that binds the world together. The U.S. has the chips. China has the market. Neither can truly divorce the other without catastrophic damage.
But look at how the U.S. is managing that tether. It's treating it like a noose. Trump explicitly warned this week that it is very dangerous for the UK and Keir Starmer to do business with China. He made the same threats regarding Canada. When your closest ally tells you that trading with the world's second largest economy is dangerous, that puts leaders like Starmer in an impossible bind. It is a choice between security and the economy.
And what did Starmer do? He went to Shanghai anyway. That's my point about pragmatism. Starmer's visit to Beijing and Carney's push for Canada to diversify trade toward ASEAN isn't a rebellion against the U.S. It's insurance. They cannot rely solely on a protectionist U.S. that threatens tariffs one day and bans planes the next. It proves that concepts like global Britain or sovereign Canada are actually functioning. They're making deals where they can. It's not a security breakdown, it's just business.
It's business conducted under duress, and that duress is creating alternative blocks, whether you want to admit it or not. You talk about tech as a bridge, but you can't eat silicon. And chips don't keep the lights on. Let's look at the physical economy, energy. That is where the real realignment is happening. You mentioned Venezuela privatizing, but consider who they're talking to. Venezuela is actively seeking an energy alliance with Indonesia. Meanwhile, Vladimir Putin is hosting the Syrian transitional president, Ahmed al-Shara, in Moscow.
A meeting in the Kremlin is hardly a new world order. Leaders meet.
It is when you look at the substance. They are solidifying a reliance on Russia amidst regional instability. It's the formation of a resistance bloc that controls key energy nodes and is coordinated to bypass the West. Russia and Iran are coordinating deeply. This isn't just business, it's a strategic fortification against Western influence.
That's a compelling argument, but have you considered the energy ceasefire?
The what?
The energy ceasefire in Ukraine. This is the most fascinating, untold story of the week. We have credible reports that Donald Trump asked Putin to stop strikes on Kyiv due to the extreme cold, and the Kremlin confirmed a pause until February 1st. Even Zelensky has advocated for this to protect the grid.
And you think this is a sign of stability?
I think it's a sign of reality. Think about it. Politicians in suits are screaming for war, but the engineers running the power grid are quietly on the phone with each other saying, if we don't stop shooting, everyone freezes to death. Physics is overruling politics. The cold weather and the mechanics of the power grid are forcing a pause that diplomacy couldn't achieve. That is the definition of pragmatism.
A pause is not peace. And while they pause for the cold, the financial markets are signaling a complete loss of faith. We saw gold tumble to $5,000 and silver drop 14% this week.
Which is a correction after a massive rally. Markets breathe.
No, analysts are calling this a dangerous phase. Traditionally, when chaos hits, people buy gold. When gold crashes alongside tech stocks, it's a liquidity crisis. It means investors are selling everything just to cover their losses. It signals deep systemic confusion. The economic signals are flashing red because the geopolitical signals are incoherent. You call it pragmatism. I call it volatility that leads to accidents.
Volatility, yes, but let's distinguish between market noise and actual conflict. You mentioned accidents.
I did, and we are seeing the potential for them everywhere. The flashpoints are igniting. The USS Abraham Lincoln is heading to Iran, a massive armada. At the same time, the EU has crossed a massive diplomatic red line by designating the IRGC, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, a terrorist organization. This isn't de-escalation, this is the West doubling down on pressure while the global South tries to build lifeboats.
I view the Armada and a designation differently. It looks like chest-thumping disguised as diplomacy. We have reports of little wriggle room. Sure, but there's also an apparent push for diplomacy behind the scenes. The US and Iran know they cannot afford a direct war. The Armada is leverage. The terrorist designation is leverage. It's about setting the table for a deal, not starting World War III.
But leverage has a human cost, and that cost is destabilizing the very societies you claim are being pragmatic. We're hearing about hell-on-earth conditions for the 85 million people inside Iran due to economic strangulation. We have Israel evaluating a reduction of aid to Gaza, and the IOM just warned about 1,340 deaths in the Mediterranean in 2025 alone.
Those are tragedies, absolutely. But states act on interests, not sentiment.
But the blowback is domestic too. You can't separate foreign policy from domestic stability anymore. Look at Capgemini, a French IT group heavily criticized this week because its U.S. subsidiary has contracts with ICE for migrant tracking. We're seeing movements like the one led by Manolo de los Santos calling for national strikes against ICE. Foreign policy is no longer foreign. The deals you love are causing unrest on the streets of Western cities. That is not stability.
That brings us to the mechanism of these deals, money. And this is where I think your fragmentation theory faces its biggest test. Donald Trump has nominated Kevin Warsh for Fed chair.
Which is a deeply politicized choice.
Perhaps. But it's a choice the market seems to understand. He's a former governor. He's related to a Trump donor, sure. But he is open to rate cuts. He wants to stimulate.
You are glossing over the danger here. The Federal Reserve's only real asset is its independence. If the world believes the Fed chair is taking orders from the White House to pump the economy for political gain, the dollar ceases to be a neutral store of value. It becomes a political weapon. This feeds directly back to my first point about BaFin. When you have a politicized Fed combined with German regulators warning about risk, you accelerate the exit. You accelerate the move toward the Eurasian model where trade is done in local currency. The EAAU is already conducting 93% of its trade in local currency. Warsh might get a short-term sugar high for the markets, but he validates the fears of every nation holding dollar reserves.
I'm sorry, but I just don't buy that the dollar is vanishing tomorrow. Despite all this gloom, despite the EAEU stats, consider India. India is predicting massive demand for Russian Sukhoi superjets. And who are they partnering with? The UAE.
Exactly. Two major powers bypassing the West to trade Russian military hardware. That proves my point.
No, it proves my point. They are doing business. The global South is just the world. Whether they pay in rupees, rubles, or dirhams, the commerce is happening. The plane manufacturer HAL in India doesn't care about the reserve currency status as much as they care about selling jets. The UAE hosting meetings with Arab League ministers in New Delhi shows that new centers of gravity are forming, yes, but they are open for business. They aren't building a fortress to keep the U.S. out. They are building a bazaar where the U.S. is just another stall.
A bazaar where the stalls are burning. You mentioned the Sukhoi jets. That is military hardware. That is India and the UAE hedging against Western reliability by buying weapons from our adversary. And speaking of military, we have reports of a foiled plot to assassinate a Russian officer in St. Petersburg, orchestrated by Ukrainian intelligence. We have the African Cup of Nations final descending into chaos with sanctions. The world is freeing. The bazaar is a war zone in disguise.
Well, the key is to add kidney beans or black beans. That's a great source of protein, and they have really good texture that works well in chili.
Chaos in a football match or a foiled plot are serious, but they aren't systemic collapse. They are the friction of a busy world. I want to go back to the tech aspect for a second. We talked about Microsoft, but consider Apple. They bought an Israeli startup, Q.ai, for nearly $2 billion this week. In the middle of all this geopolitical tension in the Middle East, a U.S. tech giant drops $2 billion in Israel. That is the ultimate proof that innovation and capital ignore the headlines.
Or it proves that U.S. tech giants are desperate to acquire anything that might save them from the AI bubble bursting. And it ties them further into a conflict zone. It's not ignoring the headlines, it's buying into the risk. And look at the backlash Capgemini is facing. Do you think Apple is immune? If the geopolitical situation in Israel deteriorates further, and with the reduction of aid to Gaza, it likely will, that investment becomes a liability.
It's a risk, certainly, but let's look at the broader picture of planetary thinking. We have NASA resurrecting 3.2 billion-year-old enzymes to search for life. We have the Artemis II mission contrasting with China's closed space program.
A closed program that is effectively challenging U.S. dominance in space.
But the U.S. program is open, it involves international partners, it's inclusive. Even in space, the Western model of cooperation, Artemis, is competing with the Chinese model. But it's competition, not war. And speaking of the planet, we have to look at the planet-home perspective on adaptation. We have data on the polar bears in Svalbard adapting to ice loss, getting fatter on reindeer meat. Nature adapts, markets adapt.
That is a genuinely terrifying metaphor. The polar bears are eating reindeer because their home is melting. You call that adaptation, I call it a crisis response. Just like Venezuela selling off its oil is a crisis response. Just like nations hoarding gold is a crisis response.
But they survive, that's the point. The bears survive. The Venezuelan economy might survive.
Survival isn't flourishing. And for the billions of people caught in the middle of this, like the returnees in Sudan facing a void of resources or the Afghans facing food insecurity, this adaptation looks a lot like suffering. The IOM warning about Sudan is heartbreaking. 3 million people returning to a war zone because they have nowhere else to go. That is what the breakdown of the global order looks like on the ground.
I agree that the humanitarian toll is the tragedy of our time, but is the answer to that toll a retreat into ideological bunkers, or is it more trade, more engagement? Trump opening the airspace to Venezuela allows families to reconnect. It allows commerce. That helps people more than sanctions did.
It helps the oil companies. Let's be honest about who wins in your pragmatic world.
It helps the economy. And a functioning economy is the only thing that feeds people. Consider the data from China regarding the overcapacity narrative. The surplus is $1.2 trillion, yes, but when you look at the full balance of payments, there are massive outflows for services and income payments. The narrative that China is just an economic predator doesn't hold up to scrutiny. They are deeply integrated. If we try to cut them out, or if they try to cut us out, everyone bleeds.
And yet, tariffs are rising. The hidden fault lines the SCMP discussed are becoming canyons. The U.S. trade deficit widened despite the tariffs, so the policy isn't even working on its own terms, but it is succeeding in alienating the world. We are creating a world where, as the Cuban foreign minister said, the militaristic doctrine threatens the zone of peace. We are pushing Latin America, the Middle East, and Asia into a corner where they have to organize against us.
I think organize against us is too strong. They are organizing for themselves. When the UAE mediates between Russia and Ukraine, or when Turkey proposes mediation between Iran and the U.S., that is the global South taking agency. They aren't waiting for Washington to solve their problems anymore.
Because Washington has become the problem. That is the core of it.
No, because the world has grown up. It's multipolar. And a multipolar world is messy, yes. It has friction. But it forces deals. It forces the UK to talk to China despite Trump's warnings. It forces the EU to look for new energy suppliers in Canada and Qatar. It forces diversification. That is resilience.
Resilience? Or redundancy, because the primary systems are failing. When you have to buy gold because you don't trust the dollar, when you have to build your own jets because you can't trust the supply chain, when you have to negotiate your own ceasefires because the superpower is absent or erratic, that is a loss of efficiency. That is a darker, poorer, more dangerous world.
I suppose we will see. But as we wrap up, I look at the board and I see movement. I see Venezuela privatizing. I see Starmer in Shanghai. I see Total Energies in Mozambique. I see a world that is refusing to stop spinning just because politics got difficult. The planet home is open for business, even if the terms of the lease are changing.
And I see the risks. I see a tech market crashing under the weight of its own hype. I see the dollar's hegemony facing its stiffest test in history from a German regulator of all people. And I see the U.S. isolating itself behind a wall of tariffs while the rest of the world sharpens their knives. We are moving from a rules-based order to a deals-based order. And in a deals-based order, if you aren't at the table, you're on the menu.
And I'd argue we've always been on the menu. Now we just have more options for who we order from.
A cynical thought to end on.
A pragmatic one.
We will leave it there. A decision in Washington affects a port in Panama, a factory in India, or a family in Venezuela. We are all connected, whether we like the terms of that connection or not. Thank you for listening to the debate.
Until next time.
That's it for today's Artificially Informed.
Nope. Thanks for spending your time with us.
Yeah.
Stay sharp, stay curious. See you next time.